Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Hello, listeners. Wanted to quickly let you know that my new book launches on April Fool's Day. The title is Stick to Business, What the Masters of Comedy Can Teach You About Breaking Rules, Being Fearless, and Building a Serious Career. Look for it on Amazon. Also, I'll be launching a podcast every day around the launch. Hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Ryan Stout. Ryan is a comedian who has appeared on Conan, HBO's Funny as Hell, Comedy Central's At Midnight, and his own half-hour special, Comedy Central Presents Ryan Stout. He was also a regular panelist on E's Chelsea Lately, and his most recent comedy album is Man in the Suit.
2019. Man in the Suit.
Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. I like the vibe because it feels very important. I don't know why. It just feels like we're in this quiet room. We're going to talk about you. It's not like I'm in Mark Maron's garage.
Yes.
Where I've been, and we talked about my life, but it's also like, you know, you're in a garage.
I also was in that garage.
Uh-huh.
And I make my people feel more important than Mark does. At least it made me feel.
Well, I mean, I certainly felt honored to be there, but you know, there's just a vibe with the space. Some people want it to be like a very laid back space, and other people like, we should talk about business. Mm-hmm. I want to get your bio correct. I want to tell my listeners what you've done and where you've been. And I like both.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, look, obviously, you're not going to pick up the same number of Twitter followers as a result of I'm Not Joking.
I was on WTF before the president, so he hadn't, you know, the show wasn't as popular then as it was now. But
it was an inside baseball show for a long time.
And it was very important that I did it because my peers kind of went, episode 302, look at you.
Yeah.
But the serious conversations.
Well done saying what episode you were so people can easily find it.
And by the way, I don't even know if they can anymore. I think some of those old episodes are harder to get.
Really?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I'm going to put in the exhibits in either case.
Great.
Yeah.
But I do like when there's like a very straightforward professional kind of setting. It always reminds me the first time I was in Australia, I was working at the Comedy Store in Sydney, and the phone rang and they answered and they're like, you know, Comedy Store. Oh, yes, our artist tonight is Ryan Stout.
Ah, your artist.
And our artist this evening. Oh, artist. Whereas, you know, comedy clubs in the United States.
Hello.
Who's on? Hang on. Who's headlining? Ryan Stout. Ryan Stout.
Well, I'm actually going to hold off my first question because you are so on brand right now.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about the different ways you're on brand. So the fact that you appreciate a professional atmosphere, and a level of professionalism, which I hadn't completely shown here. I was like trying to print shit off a printer, and I didn't have the water ready, and so on. But we had set this up for 3:00, and you said I'll be there at 2:55.
For sure,
right? So that's one example. Even the way you dress, you know, you're very casual today. You're in a polo, but it's sharp.
It's a sharp one. Yeah. The wife bought this one. I know it's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get a picture of it too. You perform in a suit.
Suit and tie.
Hence the man in the suit.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that kind of?
All right.
Why does this sort of professionalism resonate with you?
Yeah.
Why is it like obviously you have it, but also you seem to appreciate it in others. What's the background?
I think there's a level of reverence I have towards stand-up comedy and treating it like a job. And I hear it out of Seinfeld's mouth when Seinfeld talks about comedy. And he's another guy that dresses up for work.
Yes.
You know, and it's a lot of, listen, you do the work, you do your job, you focus. It's not about, I'm going to get drunk and get on stage and talk and see what comes out. Mm-hmm. No, I'm trying to craft something here. I'm in a very long process that hopefully at the end I will have something. And I don't know how to get there just like bumbling my way through it. So I will say that the suit started off just because I wanted people to sit and listen and know that I would be talking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you take the stage, you haven't even said anything yet. Look, I'm telling the audience by how I'm dressed. I'm not going to be doing cartwheels.
Yes, right.
I'm telling the audience by how I'm dressed. This is kind of the vibe you're going to get. You sit, you listen, I talk. You should be used to this because your boss probably wears a suit. You know, some of your professors probably wore suits.
Not enough.
But
yes.
I had this one professor in college. He wore the full 3-piece suit, hat, cane, and he was serious about it. And he was probably 65 when I was in his class.
I wear a suit to say to my students, this is important.
Sure.
I'm treating this as important.
Yeah. And most people who do TED Talks, they dress up because they go, I'm talking to important people about important things.
You know, here, I'll tell you my other thing. This actually just came up in the episode with Jake Kroger, who dresses very dapper dresser, is it says to the world, this is important. But then the other one is when you're performing, whether you on stage as a stand-up or me on stage as a speaker or as a professor, people have to look at you for 7 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 3 hours. I teach a Saturday class. It's 6 hours.
Wow.
You should make it as aesthetically pleasing
Make it easy for the listener.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you shouldn't be wearing distracting clothing and, you should working with what you have.
But I think for comedians too, there's always been a question of, I've been out on the street with comics at like festivals and stuff like that, and they're walking by a window and they see a jacket and they go, I wonder if I can, hey, let's go in here real quick. And then they put it on. They're like, can I wear this on stage? They're asking me because they want to know, is this distracting? Is it too flashy or is it not enough? Or does it look bland? Like we're all thinking, what is the message we send when you just look at us?
Sure.
Because
as you should.
Yeah, because first impressions are so crucial. And especially when you get into the debate, which I can't even weigh into. Somebody tried to interview me about how women dress on stage. And I just throw my hands in there. I go, it's too complicated. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
Because you wear something that's too low cut, you're deemed slutty. You wear something that covers you up too much, and people go, oh, she's a prude. And you go, all right, that's not fair at all.
Yeah, the men have the sort of comedy uniform is sort of traditionally, it's like cargo shorts and a t-shirt. You know what I mean? The very kind of like alt, I don't give a shit.
Well, I kind of blame Comedy Central for that, because Comedy Central was shooting for a very specific demographic of men 18 to 34. Or
probably even younger.
Yeah, 14 to 34.
Yeah.
And they started grabbing these comics that they're like, oh, he would appeal to young men. Oh, she would appeal to young men. And it was a lot of, especially in the 90s. In the 90s, when you've got like grunge music and you think about how people were dressing to be hey, AIDS is here, we're all going to die, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I'm wearing my flannel. Yeah.
That's what took over Comedy Central and inspired a brand new generation of comics. And then once that generation was dressed down, the upcoming generation thought, oh, that's how you dress.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. And then there is a tradition, though, of stand-ups performing in suits.
Yeah.
And so you have clearly embraced that.
I did embrace it, and it's also a level of, I joke and say that it's autism, just because it's very easy for me to do the same thing over and over again.
I see.
And I don't have to think about it. I can pack, 3 white shirts and 2 suits, and I'm ready for the weekend.
I see.
We're done.
You're ready to go.
I'm not window shopping going, can I wear that? What shoes do I have that goes with that? I've had the same polished black dress shoes since 2004.
I see. Yeah, it's a uniform.
They've been around the world. I'm very proud of them. And it's a very kind of European way of looking at wealth. Wealth means, oh, I bought that thing a long time ago. I still have it. It still works great. Yes. Versus the American wealth, which is, this is new. Isn't it great? I'm going to get rid of it in 2 months.
Yeah, you have, look, a good suit and good shoes. You may spend a lot of money up front. But not only does it look good, it lasts long.
Right.
You get what you pay for. Yeah.
I also like, too, that as I've gotten older and, everybody knows what aging's like. Your face doesn't have that elasticity that it once did. And you're saggier in certain parts. And you're like, come on, what happened to me? But you're wearing a suit. All that stuff's covered up.
Yes.
And then if you're looking at old stand-up tape, there are people who will see me from 10 years ago and go, you look exactly the same. You look great.
Yeah. I mean, a man's suit also is again, this came up in a previous episode, is, if you're sort of tall and lean like you are, you look great in a suit. If you're kind of short and pudgy, you don't look bad in a suit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It disguises a lot in terms of the male body.
You're right.
The way it's set up.
And I'm even thinking about like
in a way that like a polo shirt.
Yes.
Right? So a short pudgy guy in a polo shirt looks really short and really pudgy. You know, and a guy with hairy arms, the hair
sticks out.
It sticks out and so on, but a suit just gives you those clean lines.
It covers up all the flaws. Nobody needs to know how tan or not tan I am.
Yes.
It's totally good.
It's true.
Maybe I do have a lot of ugly moles. You can't see them.
I think you're right. It is for female comics. I mean, for female comics beyond the clothing, but the clothing is an excellent case study about the
viewer.
Complexity and the challenges that they have that men never have to really.
Yeah, we don't have to confront it as much as far as that goes.
Yeah, I mean, even things like, you know, things, again, it's the classic thing. Like a man doesn't think, how am I going to get home safely at 1 a.m. from this comedy club?
Right. You go, I'm drunk. I'll just walk.
Yeah. So different.
I'll be fine. And by the way, men sleep in their car on the road. Whereas you can find a billion feminist blogs saying, do you realize how dangerous that is for women?
Yes, right.
And then when you look at, well, if that's a cornerstone of competing in the world of stand-up comedy, which is taking gigs where you're not going to be able to make money, but you take it to get in with the club,
yes.
But then you don't have the money to have a place to stay, so you sleep in your car, like the competition is geared toward taking these risks that you shouldn't have to take, because nobody wants to sleep in their car.
Sure, certainly.
Nobody wants to, but are you willing to? And saying willing versus what is your level of danger are two different questions.
Yes.
So it's almost unfair if you're a woman and you say, well, yeah, that guy chose to sleep in his car, but if I make that same choice,
I don't feel safe.
I could be dead.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I do just a couple more things about the suit, just real quick, because it's the thing that I get asked about the most.
I see.
And I oddly enough,
which makes me not want to talk about it.
No, it's okay. I picked it because I thought it would be easy. That was the main reason.
Good,
I thought it would be easy. I thought it'd send a quick message. Some of the results that came from it, I found were I got heckled a lot less. We live in a society where people are very accustomed to saying, oh yeah, don't interrupt the guy in the suit. That's a preacher.
He's quote unquote important in some way.
Yeah.
There's actually social psychology research on uniforms. And, you know, it's why security guards wear uniforms that look like police officers, why police officers wear uniforms.
Yeah.
You know, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Right? Doctors wear lab coats. They're not in the lab, you know what I mean? But
right.
They do these things to...
They seem smart that way, so I'll trust them as a patient.
Yes.
I will tell a quick story. I was at the UCB here in LA. This is years ago. Chelsea Peretti was doing a show, and she invited me to be on. And it's her show. And in the opening half hour, which is all hers, and she puts stuff on a screen and she talks. This is before she brings her guests out. There's this woman sitting there, her and her friend come in late and then start heckling. And Chelsea deals with them. Okay. And then they continue on and the crowd kind of moans.
Yeah, sure.
And Chelsea's like, yeah, you guys, you can't do this. You already came in late. You really have to stop or you have to go. And then they kept on. And the third time they did it, I just come out from behind the curtain and button my coat. And I look at Chelsea and I raise my eyebrows and then I just point to them and go, those two? And she just nods her head yes. And I walk over to them and I just make a gesture with my hand like, all right, let's go. And they just slumped in their seats and they were like, oh, all right. And they get up and they just left. Because I said so.
Yes.
And then, of course,
you don't work there.
The crowd is delighted when Chelsea's like, and my next guest, you guys saw him earlier, Ryan Stout. And I come out and people are like, oh, you're just an asshole comic. Oh, and they just believed. They just believed that you could take care. And what's even more strange.
The joke was on them, yeah.
I believed that I could take care of them. I thought, oh, this will fool them.
I think confidence, it's funny where confidence can come from. You know, for some people, it's not washing their socks when they're watching their team play. You know, they think that's going to, you know, people are superstitious. We're these sort of weird beings. And so what's fascinating is, you know, I like that the arrow goes both ways. Like when you're dressed well, suit or not, like when you're dressed well, when you have a good haircut, when when you're like, I am put together today. Then you start to act put together and people treat you that way. And then also spontaneously when people see someone who's put together, they give them more respect.
Yeah, they respond accordingly.
And then when people give you the respect, then then you sort of stand up a little straighter and so on. And so I think a lot of people who are sort of struggling in life. So this is a awkward segue. We'll return to it later, but I've launched this other podcast called Solo: The Single Person's Guide to a Remarkable Life. And I did a bunch of episodes at the very beginning when it had a different positioning. It was actually positioned for bachelors. But Solo's not for bachelors. It's for men and women. Actually, I think that it resonates more with women than men, frankly.
Sure.
Just in terms of the world's a lot harder on women who are single than men who are single. But the original taping, the first episode, was with my barber. And I'll launch it at some point here. I didn't launch it as episode number 1 for good reason. But the topic of it is Dude, Get a Haircut. And they tell the story of the movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper. Thank you. I have a friend, Adam Bradley, but Bradley Cooper. and he takes this drug that makes him a genius. And like the first thing that he does is tidy up his apartment.
Cleans his apartment.
Cleans and organizes his apartment.
Looks around his life.
Yes. Second thing he does, he gets a haircut. Third thing he does, he starts working out. Then he goes and gets some clothing. Like, so I know it's fictitious, but like the first thing a genius does is get their life in order and get themselves in order. And I think that's like a good way to sort of, I'm like that. I'm a little, I can be a little anxious. And so things feel a little out of control. I make my to-do list, tidy up my apartment, like you're like, okay,
I've got control over these things.
I've got a little bit of control.
And I've knocked them out.
Yes.
Right.
And I've accomplished something.
Yes.
That's right.
So in that area and also in the suit and tie area, I've told comics 1,000 times because they will listen to my act and over the course of the hour, they go, how do you have so many callbacks? How do you find the way that all of these bits connect together? How do you create an arc that has like a beginning, a middle, and an end where so many other comics just get up and do 70 jokes and say goodnight?
Yes.
As long as it's funny in the beginning, funny in the middle, funny at the end, who cares? Random. But there's a flow, there's a point, you're trying to send messages, you're trying to get the crowd lathered up, and then you say goodnight to standing ovation. How do you bring a crowd on that journey? And I tell them, well, you know what happens? I have to be at the show. It's an 8:00 show. I get there at 7:30. I like to be there watching people walk in. I like to watch the openers. But you know what? My day really starts 5:30. I take a shower, shave my face. I'm ironing a shirt. And my body already knows, oh, you're getting ready to go do that thing that you always do.
It's like an athlete.
And I'm thinking about my act. And so I cannot tell you how many times I've been ironing a shirt, thinking about what I'm going to do on stage 3 hours from now. And I've had these epiphanies. And you iron enough shirts. They've talked about
it's like cleaning the pool. It's like
doing
going for
dishes,
a walk. Taking a shower.
All that stuff. You're busy, but your mind is working. And I even saw this new study. Maybe it's not new, but they took people who were novice, intermediate, and expert basketball players and had them shoot free throws. Do you know this study?
I don't know yet.
And then they made them not shoot free throws for 2 weeks, and then they brought them back to the line and shoot. And they all got worse. Okay. But then they did it again, and they said, for the 2 weeks that you're not shooting free throws, we're going to have you imagine yourself 10 minutes a day shooting free throws.
Okay.
And what they found was everybody dropped a little bit, but the expert level people dropped very little. The intermediate people dropped some. And then the novice level, the people who had never really learned how to shoot free throws, thinking about it a lot didn't help them.
Sure, yeah, they don't.
But those neural pathways, if you can just reinforce those, your brain retains a level of your skill. And so just ironing my shirt, thinking about my set, it's like doing a set before I do the set.
Yeah, it's another round of practice.
Yeah. And so I didn't realize that was helping me as much as it was until it dawned on me after doing it for literally years.
I see.
And now I'm like, oh, thank God I made that choice to to dress up and iron shirts every night.
What I hear you saying essentially is it's not doubly beneficial, it's like quadruply beneficial.
Yeah.
In all these different ways.
Well, especially when you compare it to the alternative, which is other comics were like, I was playing video games till 7:30, and then I was like, oh shit, I got to go to the show.
Yeah.
And then they rush to the show, and then they give themselves a couple of drinks, and then they get on stage, and then they get off stage and they have some more drinks, and I'm like, when the hell do you think about your act?
Yeah, when are you working?
I write on stage, dude. Yeah, sure you do.
Yeah.
Sure you do.
So this level of professionalism, so you had it in college.
A little bit.
I mean, you were doing 300 nights a year in college.
That's true. Yeah.
And you got good enough to do something that rarely happens, which is you won a comedy competition. You won the Boston International Comedy Competition.
Right.
At 22-ish.
At 22.
At 22.
Yeah.
That rarely happens.
Of course. Yeah.
And so there was something, what happened?
So,
because you were not bumbling. I mean, yes, of course you're bumbling along because you're 22 and a stand-up, but you're not bumbling along like the typical stand-up comic.
Yeah, it was a lot of focus and it was a lot of effort. And I think one of the things that also benefited me was knowing what I wanted to do while I was in college.
That
so
helps,
if
yeah.
I'm taking a psychology class, I'm actually watching the class going, how can I apply this to what I'm already interested in?
That's good.
Anthropology. How can I apply this? History. I'm doing it again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly
You've got
enough,
like your comedy. You have your like school notebook, and then you have your comedy notebook.
literally. Yes.
Yeah.
And I would schedule my classes so that I would have a break in the middle of the day where I could get lunch and then write for an hour and a half.
Okay.
So that forced me to write. So many comics are like, oh, I can't find time to write, or
You need to schedule it.
I
Yeah.
just sit there and nothing happens. And I go, yeah, I just sit there and nothing happens sometimes. But you know what? I keep sitting there and then something happens. It has taken me as long as 45 minutes just to start writing.
I see.
And then usually I will start the clock and say, now you write for an hour. But yeah, you have to suffer through it. But the consistency of the writing and the going out and trying new things. And also I was in San Francisco during a time where I was surrounded by brilliant comedians.
I see.
And I was talking to Guy Branum about that. Guy Branum, host of Talk Show, The Game Show on True TV. You can also see him all over Comedy Central. Guy, brilliant comedian. He was studying law at Berkeley, when I met him, but we're in coffee houses at night. Moshe Kasher is around. Ali Wong is around. Shang Wang is around. And Louis Katz is around. And we're all getting up and we're all doing very different things. Brent Weinbach is doing this absurdist humor that's nothing like any of us are doing. And we're like, if I were to do something absurdist, what would I do?
I see.
So-and-so's talking about pop culture. I don't do that. But if I did, what would I do? And it was like a taffy pull, just stretching your talent, being like, what can you do? And, that's been throughout history. People have noted the best violins were made by 3 violin makers within
They all live within
a few miles of each other
right.
during the same time period. Like, to be influenced by other artists, so crucial. And that's, I think, one of the heartbreaking things about people who want to be stand-up comics. You can't tell them, well, I hope you come up with a good group. I hope your peers are inspiring and, drive you to do better.
Yeah,
because I can't promise that for you.
That's right. These generational effects, I think, matter. So I have this book coming out April 1st. It's called Stick to Business, and it's business lessons from the masters of comedy. And so I have some of exactly like stuff that I'm editing right now is coming out of your mouth. This idea. So one of the chapters is called Work Hard or Hardly Work. And it's about scheduling the time to do your creative work, doing it on a regular basis, ideally every day. And then at some point releasing yourself from that grind and enjoying your life, And then the next, literally the next chapter is called Take a Bigger Stage. And one of the ideas is to go to a bigger place. And that would be a place where there's good comedy, so New York and LA are the obvious ones, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And why is that? It's because of the competition. Not only are they competition who you're competing against, but they become your friends and they become inspirations and they help you punch up jokes and
and those moves are thrilling when you know what you're looking for. Because after being surrounded by so much great comedy in San Francisco, when I moved to Los Angeles, all of a sudden I'm surrounded by these people who I had never heard of before,
Yes.
who were coming from other places. And you just go, oh my God, I've been competing against you the whole time. Didn't know you.
Yes.
But now here we are.
Yes.
But it's not you're not battling each other. You're just in the same fight together.
Yeah. It's a big pie.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a zero-sum perspective is not good. But I think like a little bit of healthy, wow, Allie has taken a leap.
Mm-hmm.
What is she doing? You know what I mean? That kind of thing it's inspiring. When I was a grad student, I had a saying which was cooperate and graduate.
Mm.
And so big exam, I put together a group of, 4 people. We did a study group. These are people who I always made sure were smarter than me, and we work together. We're not competing on the local level. We're competing on the global level.
Yeah.
Right. To get jobs, to get postdocs, to get papers, and so on. And one of the things that I did as a grad student, and admittedly I'm a competitive person, and so it's in my nature.
Mm-hmm.
But I would pick people that I admired the work that they did, who were a little bit ahead of me, and I would look at their CVs. I would look at their curriculum vitae.
Mm-hmm.
What have they published? Where are they giving talks? What are they doing? And then I looked at okay, how can I get my CV to that place by that time? And I think that those, it was good. It helped, it helped.
Of course.
Push.
Yeah. Well, you have to set goals for yourself, and it's important to know the goals that other people have set for themselves. And I think it's actually one of the things that threw me into a bit of a depression when I moved to LA, which was I moved here and then I got all this kind of, one of my first auditions was for MTV hosting a game show, and I got it. I hadn't even been in LA for 6 months.
You're like, oh, this is going to be easy.
Well, and then that show didn't go anywhere. We did a pilot, but then MTV gave me another game show pilot,
okay,
and then another, and then I did the remake of Singled Out, but it never got on TV. And we did all these contracts, and then all of a sudden I'm being offered, well, you're going to do this thing, it's going to be on TV, and you are going to host MTV Spring Break, and you are going to do this thing. And I did all this television work. And then I ended up doing like a Comedy Central half hour. And then I was like, yeah, things are okay.
Right.
But then I went, well, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
Like in my head, I didn't know what am I supposed to do now? Like it's been such a clear-cut ladder up to that point.
I see.
It was you open at comedy clubs, you feature at comedy clubs, you headline, you get on TV, you do your special, and there's no answer.
Yeah.
And I collapsed.
Oh, is that right?
I just didn't know what to do. And I was like, well, I don't know. My agents are telling me that I should just be patient and see what comes along. So I guess they know better than I do. They did not. They did not know better than I do.
Yeah, and also the other thing, they don't care as much either.
They don't. They're very short term. They want to squeeze you for money. Sure. And then when you're not making money, they go, yeah, it's not working out.
Yeah.
But as far as my mental health went, to be able to say, well, what do you want out of this?
Okay.
As an 18-year-old, what did you want out of this? And then as a 28-year-old, what do you want? That answer should change.
It's a good question. I think the average person doesn't ask that question. They just keep doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Keep doing the same thing. I actually have the same, I'm older, but I have so I recently got full professor.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's the mountaintop,
uh-huh.
And most people never get there. You start out wanting, as a psych undergrad, thinking you'd become a professor. And, there's just incredible attrition. It's just a grind. It'll grind you up. And lo and behold, I did it.
Uh-huh.
And the natural thing is for the average person, they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep on doing this. I like it enough. I complain a lot about it, but I like it enough.
Yeah.
And what else can I do?
That's that's the other issue.
And I got these bills. I got this mortgage. I got these tuition things, all this stuff. And so one of the things I'm doing on my sabbatical is the typical full professor this is how far they'll push themselves. Well, do I want to really keep leaning into the research? Right? Or, do I want to start doing some new innovative teaching related stuff? Or maybe I'll become more of an administrator. Maybe I'll go into the dean's office, or, I'll become the department chair, and I'll, and so those are sort of the three where you'll change a focus or, the kind of a thing. of course, I'm thinking about those things.
Yeah.
But I'm also letting myself think beyond that. And I think you owe yourself.
Yeah, you have to keep changing things and hope that you're interested in whatever it is you're doing. Just from when I was going to school, there weren't very many colleges that taught anything about stand-up comedy.
Sure.
So I was forced to just study performance arts, and then that moved over into creative writing a little bit, and then, just being interested in how people make stuff. I was looking at photography a little bit, and I was looking at, the history of painting, but you just get in this mindset of, this is people making things.
Yes,
and
it's a creative endeavor.
What's very funny in the world of art is college is where a lot of artists think like, I'm going to study art, then I'll go out and be an artist. And colleges create a lot of artists, but it's also a place where a lot of artists go, maybe I can go teach art. And then they start teaching art.
Yes.
And then they don't have time to make their own.
Of course.
So while colleges are creating artists, they're also cannibalizing artists.
That's interesting.
And it's just this fascinating place where some artists get away with it, where they go and they go, yeah, I teach art and I make my own. Mm-hmm. And they end up being able to make their own because in the college environment, they're not the best professor.
Yes,
they don't go to faculty meetings. They're not responsible for stuff in their department. People stop asking them to do things.
Yeah, because they're artists. Yeah. Okay, wait, I want to get back to your thing. I think that, so just to finish that thought, now there's actually a lot of resources about comedy.
I wouldn't say there are a lot, but I'd say
there's a lot more.
Certainly a lot more. And then there are a lot more schools where you can actually take a class where the title of the class is stand-up comedy.
Yes, and there are more books, you know what I mean? And so I know you do because you're one of the few people who actually read the humor code.
I did, yes.
And I think even took some notes on it.
I was, I remembered a lot of things because I was so connected to them already.
We met for coffee, and you were like talking about stuff in the book. And
yeah.
I was like, wow. Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I think that's in the book. I think
I might have, you know what? I do remember going through it, just a quick pass, being like, well, if I'm going to meet with Peter, I wonder if he can answer some of these things.
Yes, you had some questions. That's right. Exactly what it was. You had some questions. And then, I mean, there's obviously YouTube videos. Steve Martin has a master class now and so on.
Right.
USC has a minor program. There's a lot.
There's a lot more than there was when I was interested.
But not in the same way that there's creative writing classes at every single university and so on.
Correct. Yeah, you can study poetry maybe at all 4,000 universities.
Yes, exactly right.
And yet, in our culture, poetry is just kind of one of those mysterious things that everybody knows is out there.
Yes.
The average person, you ask them questions about poetry. And I actually like this. I like the idea that they put their hands in the air and go, yeah, I never really got it. That's how I feel like people should be with stand-up comedy.
Yes.
They should put their hands in there and go, I've seen some of it. I liked some. I didn't like some. It seems like it's this crazy thing. That's what people should do. Instead, people have this need to go, well, let me tell you who's funny.
Yeah,
and you go, wow, you've got a lot of confidence for somebody who really, I'm sure, doesn't know anything. And I say that because I've studied a lot, and I don't think I know a lot about it.
The more you learn, the more you realize you have a lot to learn.
Yeah, the Dunning-Kruger thing. Yes, that the internet loved.
They did indeed. So you sit back and you assess.
Mm-hmm.
And have you come to some conclusion about
what to do next?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it was hard for me because things got real ugly probably around the end of 2015, 2016 maybe. I was up for this another game show for a different network, and it looked like a big blinking green light. It was the only time I've ever done a game show pilot where I walked off the set and I was like, we just sold a game show.
Really?
There's the way the audience responded, the way we got to that final ending where it was like a horse race and it's just electric in the air.
Yes.
And the funny lines that I had that day, it was just explosive. I was like, if this doesn't sell, people are crazy. And everybody's excited, and then it just got quiet. And then my manager was like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. And then he calls over, and their network's like, oh, no, we still like it. We're just trying to make some decisions. And then we hear through the grapevine that while the network really likes me, and while they have a contract with me, somebody just raised their hand at a meeting and went, maybe we should get a woman to host it.
I see.
And so then they went doing this talent search for women.
Okay.
And my manager, once he found that out, he called. He was like, guys, that's not how business works. You can't keep him under contract if you're out there looking for other talent.
I see.
You have to let him out of his contract. You're not going to find the talent, and then you have to crawl back on your hands and knees and pay a lot more money. That's how this works.
I see. Okay.
So you either stop your talent search and give Ryan the job under the contract we have, or you let him out of his contract. And they all went, yeah, all right, we'll let him out of his contract. But then their search for this mythical woman they wanted to host didn't reveal any results.
I see. And so it
didn't come to fruition, partly because, and this is an element of diversity that people aren't considering in our culture right now, which is all of the women who were capable of doing the job, the network went, hey, we'd love you for this job. And that woman's agent would go, great, she's expensive because she gets a lot of offers.
Yes, yeah, because there's demand.
And the network went, well, we don't have that kind of money. We've only got this much money. And the agent goes, well, you're only going to get white guys to work for that amount of money. And then the network goes, Christ, we have to go find a white guy. But we can't crawl back to Ryan because he's going to ask for more money because we've already dicked him over. So who ends up getting the show? Some white kid who's never done like a game show before.
I see.
But the whole situation kind of crushed me because I was like, man.
It's a big break.
Well, and I had put a lot of effort into getting that show on its feet. Like we had started that show in a conference room and then got them interested in buying a pilot. And then got them interested in like paying for that. And then we did it and succeeded again. And you have so many milestones along the way of getting a show up and running to have them go, all right, we're going to pick the show, but not Ryan anymore. And I'm like, I've been with you guys for months.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Why would you turn on me? So that happened. And at the same time, my writing partner and I, we sold the show to the Esquire Network. And then Esquire Network folded.
It did, yes.
And so those happened at the same time. And my head just hung and I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this?
This was 4.5 years ago or so?
Yeah, and I had to really reevaluate, what do you want? And so I realized I hadn't released a comedy album in a while, so I released my second one, and then I released my third one, and it was just one of those things that I had to realize that what I wanted out of show business was what I saw as a kid, which was me sitting on my bed, thumbing through a big binder of CDs that were comedy CDs, and putting them on and listening to them and loving them.
I see.
And I was like, oh, I want to create that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of money in doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't think there's a lot of money in pottery. And people give their lives to pottery. And there's not a lot of money always in painting, and people give their lives to that. So you just go, okay, if we're going to pick this artist lifestyle, let's understand why we're doing it and reconcile the fact that you didn't get into this to be a millionaire.
Indeed.
You got into this to create stuff.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Right.
And let's stop doing shitty game shows that you don't really want to do, that you're doing hoping for a paycheck.
Okay. That's great. That's so this is so I want to ask you a counterfactual question. Ryan, congratulations. You're the first person who's been able to put off the first question for 38 minutes.
Boom!
Which is, if you weren't working as a comedian, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I've thought about that again and again, and I really have no answer for you. Okay. I would probably be just depressed in some terrible job. I've always said enterprise rent-a-car. Yeah. I've always said that as
right? I always say that too. I said I should be managing an enterprise rent-a-car.
I think I heard you say that at one point, and I was like, that's weird, because that was always my answer.
That's so funny.
And poor Enterprise.
Look, it's not a bad company.
No.
But, I mean, it's like, yeah, I wasn't saying, so for the listener.
You know what it is? Enterprise sounds so big.
It does.
It sounds so important. And in our head, what we associate that big thing with is this grueling, boring job behind a desk.
By the way, that's such a stand-up comic observation.
Yeah.
Enterprise rent-a-cars. Enterprise sounds so big.
Enterprise.
So the background for listeners who haven't heard me talk about this, I'd like to express gratitude for how good my life has turned out. And it's a mix of skill, hard work, and luck. And I can point to moments of luck that if it didn't go that way, it would have undone all of the hard work and skill.
Right.
And so what I say is that if you had plugged all of my attributes as from my family, from everything about me, if a scientist made a spreadsheet, intelligence and this and that and all those things, you plugged it into an algorithm that predicted someone's career, I would be managing an enterprise rent-a-car. And I know, and I would be doing a good job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be a shitty manager, and it wouldn't be a shitty location, but that's what I would be doing. Now, of course, the beautiful thing is, let's assume for a moment we're living in a simulation, right? So you run that static prediction in a simulation. Now there's error, right? Good error and bad error.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's probabilistic stuff that happens, right? The good luck goes your way in some iterations and it goes against you in other iterations.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So in your story about the hand that goes up that says, why don't we get someone else?
Yeah.
You run that iteration
Without
10,000 times.
Yeah.
And maybe 60% of the time the hand goes up. 40% of the time
they just
doesn't.
all
That
go,
the person
like
has
Ryan.
food poisoning that day and they're not in there and so on. You see what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And so what that can do for you is it can, especially if the world has turned out well, it can give you a bit of appreciation. Like this was not fate. It wasn't destined to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I recognize that in this particular iteration of the simulation, so to speak, things have broken my way.
Sure.
A lot.
Yeah.
Coupled with enough skill and a lot of hard work. And here I am.
I do get
living this remarkable life.
This little idea of alternate universes sometimes.
It's fun.
Where I go, oh, you know what? I'm really suffering greatly in another universe.
Absolutely.
But this one I'm doing good.
By the way, you're dead. We are dead.
In a lot of them.
In some of those, you are a miscarriage.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
yeah, you
I'm
have
being
to
cheeky.
All
but
the probabilities have to be there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so we really should just, I mean, this is going to sound so fucking preachy, but like, you really should be marveling at the fact that you are alive and, and when I say you, I mean you as in the, anyone
Sure.
who's.
Well, and that's partially why I always encourage people to engage in some creative activity where you have to make something. I don't care if you're making paintings or pottery or jokes, because when you sit down and look at what you've created, a lot of times with enough distance, you go, yeah, I have no idea how I got all that done.
Yeah.
That's kind of incredible that I did all of that. Look at all these notebooks that are on my shelf that I filled up with words. Isn't that weird that I was able to do all that?
Yeah,
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. But
it's sort of too bad you're married. Because you would be you'd be a great person for solo. Because that's like, I haven't written out like, like Jordan Peterson has his like 12 principles for life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I should come up with like the principles for a remarkable life. But one of those principles is to create more than you consume.
Create more than you consume is something that I've said in therapy a lot. And yet it's one of those things that is very difficult.
It's not easy to do.
When you're sitting there eating a sandwich and you're like, I've already lost. Damn it.
Well, I was thinking more like Netflix, YouTube, Instagram, etc.
Books and magazines. Yeah. It's very easy now with a lot of the apps on the phone. I really think that my next step to creating more than I consume will be getting rid of a smart device.
Oh, okay.
Because just scroll through all those things.
Yes.
It really lights my brain up. And I like it.
I get, and they're engineered to be that way.
It's a complete waste of a day sometimes.
Creating is difficult but rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Consuming is easy but shallow.
Shallow.
Yes. Now, it's why I'm not as anti-Instagram as a lot of people are.
Mm-hmm.
If you make stuff on Instagram.
Right.
Right. So, you can become a storyteller on Instagram, and that's a creation process.
Mm-hmm.
Right now you're using a different muscle.
Right. Writing on Twitter and reading on Twitter, two different things.
Exactly.
Two different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, of course, though, I've pulled back my Twitter use a lot because I had, I don't know, God knows how many tweets I've sent in my life, but let's say it's been 20,000.
Okay.
I got on it early.
Yeah.
I kind of fell in love with Twitter early.
All right.
That was my go-to social media. So you take 20,000, let's say the average tweet has, I don't know, 10 words, probably more than that.
Yeah,
maybe 20.
I'd say 25, yeah.
Okay.
Because some of the tightest jokes are 19 words.
Okay, there
and
you
a lot
go.
of people are going way beyond that.
Right, so you go, let's say it's 20 words, right? You just go, that's 400,000 words.
Mm-hmm. How long does it take to write 400,000 words?
So you take 400,000 words, that becomes two pretty tight 60,000 word books.
Yeah.
See where I'm going with this?
Two of them. Yeah, you could have made something And instead you made this shallow stuff.
Yes, that's right. I threw, basically, I just, I threw it into the ocean.
Right.
Yeah.
So the leader of the free world right now has tweeted something like 33,000 times since taking his position.
Is that right? I didn't know it was that much.
I seem to remember that number.
Yeah.
It might have been something else, but whatever the number was, I said, let's pretend it takes a minute to write a tweet.
Okay.
Just 1 minute.
Sure.
How long has the president used up writing tweets? Like if his job was to go in and work 8 hours a day, how long has he been tweeting? He's been tweeting for 14 work weeks.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you go, is that really? And then how long has he been playing golf on top of that?
Yeah. Here's what I like about your logic is the golf stuff is obvious, but it's like the comic perspective that comes up with the 14 weeks.
Yeah.
My compliments to you. Right?
Thank you.
So I want to, you said something about moving away from the smartphone. And so I have a previous guest who we were chit-chatting before this who came up. So I had Ari Shaffir on this podcast.
Yeah.
And
he's a guy that got away from the smartphone.
that's exactly right.
And I always admired him for doing that.
He has a flip phone. I think he vacillates. Sometimes he goes back, but we talked about it at length on the podcast about, there isn't a good solution yet. There's this thing called the dumb phone, the light phone 2, that's designed to kind of be a very basic phone. You do text, calls, alarm, navigation, and so on. But someone is going to come up with an ability to customize your phone. So like Ari was saying, if I remember correctly, he wants Uber and Lyft, and so right now it's either you basically have this completely stupid device or you have this incredibly smart device. But when you have the incredibly smart device, you get everything, and it assumes willpower,
and all sorts of crazy stuff. Yeah,
and so there's sort of this world where you have this thing. This phone,
we want an in-between.
That's in between, right?
Yeah.
That you can, right? That there's not going to be any social media on there. I took email off my phone years ago. It was revolutionary.
Okay. Wow.
It was really incredible.
So that was the thing with Ari. He would, if you needed him, you could call him, or you could get a hold of him on email. And whenever he checks his email during the day, he would see it.
Yes.
And that was kind of the
Once
end of
a
it.
day or whatever.
And then as far as like website stuff or social media, he would log in and post and get the hell out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so Ari's like a great crossover guest for the two podcasts because he's a solo guy and living this very
travels the
life.
world. I haven't talked to him in a long time because he's running around doing stuff. But
yes,
I'm very aware.
Well, you were saying I didn't know this, so the theme in Shtick to Business is this idea of comedians aren't afraid to pick a fight.
We are not.
They're not afraid to polarize.
Of course.
And I write about Anthony Jeselnik and how whenever there's a tragedy, his friends and family text him, don't do it. Because they know that he's going to send
something out
there that is going to cross the line to many, is going to be funny to some, is funny to him, and it's his perspective. So you were saying, Kobe Bryant recently died.
Yeah,
obviously.
unexpectedly, tragically,
yes.
the whole... and living in Los Angeles and not even being a huge basketball fan, you could just feel the vibe in this city that
LA
day.
is reeling.
People were baffled.
And I think and so...
And anytime a legend dies young, people, you almost go, oh no, if that can happen to them.
It does.
I can't imagine reminder. Weak little me.
Yes.
What can happen to me? So Ari Shaffir for years when somebody dies, he puts out a very nasty tweet.
Okay.
Just, ripping into them. Okay. Talking about how worthless they were or whatever else. So when Kobe Bryant passes away.
As an aside, I want to just, so what's really fascinating is Ari keeps his Twitter account unverified.
Yeah.
And he does so for two reasons. One, he believes is that it's elitist to have a verified account. It's like there's these people who are important, and then there's the rest of you.
Right.
And then the second one
which ignores something else, which is the third group, which is the completely anonymous trolls.
Yes.
You don't know their name, you don't know their handle, there's no way to track them down. And so you have to take those people into account too. It's not just normal people and then the elite. There's a definite third group
That's
out
fair.
there. Yeah.
That's fair. But the other reason he does it is strategic, which is he can never be quoted, right? Because it's not a verified account.
Uh-huh.
No one can ever say, Ari Shaffir said this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny.
Right? So
that is very funny.
So that's, and so here, of course, the thing is, I never thought that. I have a verified account.
Of course.
First of all, I didn't think much about the elitism part of it either, because it doesn't feel that way anyways for me.
Yeah.
But I carefully choose my words on Twitter.
You try to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I make some mistakes, but for the most part. And so what did he do?
Ari's not verified and is not worried about being quoted, so he tweets with what he thinks is impunity to say whatever he wants, and then it turns out it's not true. So when celebrities die, he has historically ripped into them and said something nasty about them.
See.
Even if it's celebrities that he knew, people that he had a personal relationship and liked, people like Mitzi Shore, who owned the Comedy Store. And she died, he rips into her. Ralphie May, very funny comic that
and a beloved comic too.
He rips into Ralphie May. So Kobe Bryant dies, people are reaching out to Ari to be like, dude, where's your Kobe Bryant tweet? Where is it?
Oh, also, by the way, he hates the Lakers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend all the time talking about Ari,
of course,
but it's fun.
I think it's important to give people the backstory because it's the setup to the joke.
It is the setup.
So the setup is he does this all the time. He does it with Kobe Bryant.
He hates the Lakers.
People lose their minds. People are giving him death threats. It is a huge controversy right now. And of course, people are also saying any comedian who defends Ari Shaffir is complicit in this thing, and they're disgusting and ugly. And you go, wait, time out. He's done this forever. You missed the first half of the joke.
He is consistent.
Yeah. And now you're going to blame me for what he's doing?
I see.
So the internet's in an outrage right now, as you can imagine. And they like to do that. They like to blame comics for things.
Sure, of course. So, it's easy.
Yeah.
The other things is, again, I like to say, so difficult to create, so easy to criticize.
Oh, yeah.
The thing about Ari is he doesn't care.
Does not.
It's really striking in a way that is inspiring to me. Like so you think about what leads people to comedy is that they are often misfits. They don't fit in. Mm-hmm. They question the status quo. Mm-hmm. They see through the bullshit, and then what happens is, by the way, I think this is not just comics. There's a lot of artists. I think rappers have this. Like, I think that there's anybody who I think punk rockers have this.
Well, the consistency is you say, I'm going to be a rapper. I'm going to be a comedian. I'm going to be whatever. And society goes, no, you're not. We're told no instantly from day one.
Yeah.
You can't do it. You won't do it. There's no way to do it. And then as we get deeper and deeper into it, people go, you're not really a comedian, though. You're not really a rapper. And then you're releasing your first album. You're making money. Your bank account is full. And they're like,
you're making mixtapes.
But you're not popular. People don't know who you are, so it still doesn't count. Like, people are telling us no the whole time. So we've got real thick skin when it comes to no.
Okay, but there's a crossover point.
Yes.
And this is what I find striking, is people get to a point, and now the money is good, and now they're relying on this stuff, and then it's like, don't rock the boat.
Yeah.
Hey.
You worked so hard to get here.
Behave.
Uh-huh.
And so then what happens are these folks who are counterculture suddenly
assimilate.
Mm-hmm. And so it's why I love Kanye so much. Because you know what? Kanye is like, I don't care what you think.
Right.
And I say, like, look, you might not like Kanye, but I'm like, but at least that guy is consistent.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to say he's a full sellout. You know what I mean? Because he's not afraid to rock the boat. He's not afraid to lose money. He's not afraid to,
Anger people, yeah. Well, and I think Doug Stanhope moved to a small house in Bisbee, Arizona, and went, yeah, I'm going to continue doing whatever I want. Because I have nothing to lose.
And what I think is fascinating is sometimes that the world rewards that, right? Dave Chappelle walks away from a $50 million contract and makes more money.
Gets a new
in the long run because of that.
Right.
He's not, he puts out Sticks and Stones. The critics hate it, but the audience loves it. So
yeah,
I think that's a really fascinating.
Well, and it comes to between, this is something I was thinking about recently that people struggle with, which is the difference between art and entertainment.
Yes.
Because they have a really hard time defining it. And I get really upset when comedians are asked, is stand-up art or entertainment? And they give the worst answer, which is also true, which is they say, well, it's both. And you go, yeah, that doesn't help us.
Yeah, you're like, sometimes it's art.
You're not actually helping people.
Both.
I guess we can all go home now. You've answered the question. Yeah. It's almost, in my mind, like the beginning of the Super Bowl, they flip a coin and they go heads or tails, and you go, well, it's both. Yes, thank you, Schrodinger. While it's spinning I'm not asking you about quantum superposition. I'm asking you heads or tails.
Right.
And to ask a comedian, what makes it art? Now, what makes it entertainment? They have a hard time answering it. And if comedians have a hard time with the thing they do every day, I know the audience has a hard time.
Indeed. Yeah.
And I always defined it as entertainment is very simple. It's very shallow. It's, did you like it?
Yes.
You did? It's entertainment.
That's right.
And second question, you didn't like it? Well, did a whole bunch of people like it? They did. Well, then it's entertainment.
Yes.
Third question, you didn't like it. They didn't like it. Okay, well, then what are we talking about it for?
Yeah.
We should be done here. There's no point in ripping into it because nobody liked it. So then we get to the art portion of it, and you don't matter at all. And the audience hates that because the art portion is, well, what did the artist create? How did the artist create it? Talk about them. You talk about the person on stage. How did they execute? And it doesn't matter how you felt about how they executed, just what did they put into it? What was the work behind it? What were the choices that the artist made? And a lot of people don't have the vocabulary. You actually, on this podcast, talked to Jesse David Fox.
I did.
And he brought that up regularly, the vocabulary thing. Like, how do you describe what somebody's doing? And a lot of people don't have the vocabulary because they didn't learn it in school the same way they did for poetry, the same way they did for painting.
And have forgotten it.
All of these other things. They never learned it, so they assume that it doesn't exist. And so you get into this problem, and then there's the issue of, well, what do comedians want? Do you want the audience to look at what you're doing as entertainment, or do you want them to look at it as art? And you know what the answer is? Both.
Yes, of
because
course.
We're hypocrites. But there's a way to do it, and I always try to push this onto the audience. If you've never seen the comic and you don't know the jokes, we want you to sit there, relax, and respond. It's just entertainment. Don't try picking your way through the poem before the poem is even finished.
Right.
Just enjoy it. And then if you have the opportunity to go back and watch again, go through with a fine-tooth comb. Go through 3-4 times. But if we're live at a club, listen, we're not done yet. The thing hasn't been created. We're in the process of creating.
I see.
So just sit there, laugh or don't laugh. That's all we need from you. Don't rationalize why you should or shouldn't laugh. Just respond. Because for all you know, that joke that you hated, that's the 6th time that joke is bombed. And I've already said, well, we're not going to do that one ever again.
Sure.
But if somebody puts out a special, well, yeah, you get to rewind. You get to watch again and again. Yeah. You can go through the bits and treat it like art. And we're done with it. So we've put ourselves in a position to be like, yes, we put it out. So we said it's ready. So feel free to tear into it. But don't tear into our live performance that you're watching for the first time. You're a lunatic.
Thankfully, heckling is rare, but it's also somewhat unique. I shouldn't say somewhat unique. That's a terrible use of the word unique. Heckling is rare, but it's common relative to other performances.
Yes, it's relegated to stand-up as opposed to...
No one heckles improvisers.
Nobody's watching the painter paint, going, don't use that color.
Right.
No, that sucks. That's hacky. Yeah. Your lines aren't straight.
Okay, let me defend the heckler for a moment.
Okay. I didn't attack the heckler, but go ahead. Defend the heckler.
You're criticizing the person who's in the audience.
Well, because they're heckling based on something that they just saw.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. No, trust me. I mean, we all agree hecklers are bad.
Yeah.
But what happens is you put people into a club and then you require them to order 2 drinks,
And by the way, a lot of them are already on opioids.
Yeah.
We're in an epidemic right now.
Right.
So please take the depressant and put it on top of your downers. Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead. Get a nice buzz on.
And then you people,
Yeah, us people.
you comics,
We mic talkers,
make this job look easy,
which is the job.
which is the job, right? But because it looks so easy, people think it's easy.
Why not?
And
What's
they can
the problem?
do it and so on. Yes.
Right.
And so, so it's like this.
I don't think they're bad people. I think they don't understand
They're in a bad context.
why they shouldn't.
That's true.
Yeah. It's like, the first time the kid is caught literally eating cookies and candy and whatnot before dinner, you go, "What are you doing?" And the kid goes, "Well, I was hungry.
Yes.
And this stuff looked good."
Yeah.
Why are you yelling at me?
Yeah. What have I done wrong?
Yeah, there was no
trade-off.
Yeah, you weren't taught any sort of social decorum about heckling and not heckling.
Yeah.
So you just did it. And that's the other issue with stand-up comedy, which is, and people hate when I say this, stand-up comedy is for poor people. It's not for rich people.
Oh,
Because rich people don't give a living fuck about anything they can't make money off of. They get into art. You know why? Because they can put the painting in their collection and sell it later for a
that's
profit.
interesting.
There's no way in to stand up for rich people. And everybody looks ugly when they laugh. So
I certainly do.
They don't want to look ugly, and they don't know how to make money off of this, so they're not interested.
That's interesting.
And so who's going to see stand up? Poor people. And poor people are the same.
Oh, by the way, you know who's poor? Young people.
Young people and hard working people who just want to have a nice time. They don't want some intellectual show. They're like, I paid money to be here.
I just
make
want a
me
couple
laugh.
beers. Let's
I don't want to think
disconnect.
too hard about this. Who the fuck are you to make me do that? And their feeling is, I'm not even here for you. And the comedian on stage is like, what do you mean you're not here for me? My name is on the marquee. This is my show.
Yeah.
And so you've got this
But they're
conflict.
here because it's 9:00 on a Saturday. They're
Right.
not here for Joe Schmo.
Exactly. So there's this conflict of what do you want out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And both sides are right. So the conflict will always remain.
Indeed.
It's never going to get worked out.
That's right. I don't. I mean, part of me feels, when professors complain about whatever they complain about, and then when comics complain about the stuff that they complain about, part of me goes, well, this is what you signed up for.
Yeah.
And you can job craft around some of this stuff, but some of it is just, this is the water you're swimming in.
Right.
And so,
But there is a way to, well, let me put it this way. Most people will gladly agree that timing is important in comedy. They will gladly agree to that.
yes.
But then they'll say heckling is okay. And I go, but you're ruining the timing.
Yeah,
you can't have both.
Yeah.
So even the people who are heckling know that they're wrong in some regard, but also just don't, they're like, it's not important. I don't have to deal with it, which is just upsetting. My parents always taught me that a performance is a gift. So you have to receive the performance the same way you would receive any gift. You don't knock it out of somebody's hands and go, what is that shit?
You don't criticize
I don't
as you're
need
opening
this.
it.
I won't even criticize a movie in the movie theater. I will wait until we get outside.
Interesting.
Just out of reverence for, look, you have to accept that people worked on this, and you have to accept that they tried.
That's the thing. I do think that's the person who's a creator, on one hand, has a more license to criticize because they know what it's like to do it, but they often are more appreciative because they know what goes into the creating process.
There is one thing that is severely lacking from a stand-up comedy audience and critics' point of view, which is my friend Alexis. She's a painter, and she can stand in front of a painting, tell you all the reasons why it's a good painting, and then you say, do you like it? And she goes, no, if I never saw it again, I'd be more than happy if it just left my life forever. But when it comes to stand-up comedy, if somebody doesn't like the stand-up comedy, they can't say why it's good.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
And that's very common. Instead, they rationalize all the reasons why their feelings are correct.
Yes.
And that's the majority of criticism on the internet, even when it comes from quote-unquote professional comedy critics.
I will say this is not a new phenomenon. The only thing new is that everybody has a microphone now.
Everybody has a microphone and very little education. Yeah.
People were criticizing comedy in the same way
100%.
in the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, when it was even when it was getting going. Like Luisa Diaz has this great Instagram post where she's uncovered all these newspaper headlines criticizing comics as being tone deaf, and
Cliff Nesteroff does some old
that's fun
old things too. But you were, and I just remember this for some odd reason, but you were talking to Jesse David Fox on this podcast, talking about Kevin Hart, talking about how the criticism never got to us before. Like, there was always criticism, but we could ignore it. Now people are tweeting at us, so it's at our front door, and now we have to confront it. And I don't know if you remember that at all, but I didn't think that was actually accurate.
Okay.
Because I remember I started comedy in 2001. People would gladly come up to me after a show at a coffee house. I've been doing comedy for 4 weeks, and they're telling me why what I did was awful.
That's fair.
And I'm like, who the fuck are you? I've been coming to this open mic for 4 weeks. I've never seen you before. I don't know why you're allowed to criticize me. But the critics have never had any problem just walking up to our faces and being like, here's why you're awful.
Hold on, but let me turn this around on you for a second. It's
okay.
Like getting up on stage and standing there with a mic.
Yeah.
You asking for, like, when I write an academic paper, you're inviting criticism.
You are, but the criticism for your academic paper, if it's entertainment based, if it's just like, well, you wrote about something, I thought it was boring. That's not valid criticism in the academic world.
Well, because every paper's boring.
Well, sure, but and I think that's the real definitive thing between art and entertainment. If somebody's just telling me about their feelings after a show, here's why I think it's boring. I go, yes, but the audience didn't think that.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So don't talk to me, go talk to them. That's what I've always thought was the saving grace of stand-up comedy. As soon as one person says it's bad, if there's anyone else on the planet who's willing to say, I thought it was great. Great, well then you two argue. I get to go home.
Yeah, I always say you can't say something's not funny. You have to say it's not funny to me.
Right.
That's that's when it really goes down to.
Sure. But people want the comedians to defend ourselves now. That's what I
think that's a mistake.
And my argument is I don't have to because of all these people laughing.
I think that's a mistake.
And what's very strange now is this phenomena where critics are trying to take the position where the audience laughing doesn't matter.
That's what happened with Sticks and Stones.
Right. And what I'm saying is, yes, but bombing matters. So you can't say that if the comedian bombs, they failed, but then they get laughs and they also failed.
Yeah,
you can't treat those like they're the same.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And people will do it. And as a matter of fact, you go back, hindsight's amazing. You can go back and look at all of the outrage that was happening in 2011, 2012, 2013 about comedians allegedly telling a ton of jokes about rape. And you go, okay. And you read all these articles about rape jokes. They never acknowledge that a rape joke could bomb. They won't do it. Because as soon as they acknowledge that, they would have to acknowledge the difference between a joke that bombs and a joke that kills.
I see. So it's
you know what I mean?
Topical, yeah.
So just going back, I don't know if that was just a blind spot for literally so many authors who wrote about rape jokes. Mm-hmm. They could not even set up a situation where a rape joke would bomb. So they instead lumped all the jokes into one pile and they said, all these jokes kill all the time. And you go, well, that's not true at all.
Yeah, sure.
Not true.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah. The issue is it's so hard to make a good joke.
Well, it's also people believing this foregone conclusion that because somebody suffered some sort of trauma that they cannot laugh. And you go, that's not true at all.
Well, so I actually, yeah, that's a fair assessment. So I think one of the neater findings in the behavioral sciences, I have a few pet findings that I like a lot. So everybody knows about post-traumatic stress.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a very real phenomenon.
Yes.
It's mediated by lots of things and moderated by lots of things. So like, some people are more predisposed. Like not every soldier who goes to war comes back with post-traumatic stress, right? So it interacts with certain things, with
and there's levels of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It interacts with the context and so on and so on. But what's fascinating is there's something called post-traumatic growth.
And
so there's a class of people and a class of things that happen in the world where you suffer some great loss, some devastating, a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
Some traumatic event.
Sure.
And as a result, you become better for it. And so, not studied as much, You know what I mean? It's, obviously it's not popular to talk about how bad things are good.
Probably hard to study too.
It is
difficult.
But they can, but you can do it in the same way that you study post-traumatic stress. Well, actually, you have to do it differently because people don't go to clinics for it. And then they don't become alcoholics because of it. And they don't start having to take pain or depression medication and so on.
And they might not be so open to the idea that, that thing that you're doing so well right now, it's because of that horrible thing that happened to you.
But what you can do is you can point to moments in time, people losing their jobs, people getting cancer, people losing a spouse, losing a child. Like these are things that are, obviously
life-changing.
Exactly. And what happens, and of course these things are still somewhat of a puzzle, of why it happens to some people not, but then they quit jobs that they were unhappy for and they pursue their art. They reunite with long lost parents who they haven't talked to in 20 years and so on. And they start nonprofits. There are these things which all of a sudden there's this tremendous psychological, emotional, relational growth that happens as a result of it.
And then you bring up this traumatic thing and they go, oh yeah, that happened to me. It was very hard. That's kind of the end of it.
They were it was devastating, and I don't like to say this, but it was one of the best things that could ever happen to me.
Yeah. So, one of the things when it comes to trauma and comedy and joke topics, I had a strong chunk of material that I would do on stage about suicide. And this was not an anti-suicide rant by any means. It was literally like, we're going to tell jokes. These are jokes. And
very Jimmy Carr of you.
Yeah.
I had Jimmy Carr
Look,
on, and
guys, this is the topic.
Yes.
I'm gonna have crafted a joke around it, probably multiple jokes. So this woman comes up to me after a show in Minneapolis, and she comes over and she says, "Excuse me, you were on stage just now. I just I wanted to talk to you because my son he attempted suicide, and he survived, and he lives at home with me now, and we tell him, you survived for a reason. And I always told myself that if anybody ever joked about suicide, that it's just not funny. But you were on stage and you were joking about suicide, and I don't know, I just found myself laughing. And I just wanted to thank you because you gave levity to the one thing that I never thought I would ever have levity for. And maybe I never will again, but just to have that little bit of like hope is meaningful to me."
That's great.
Now, what a bigger compliment can you get as a comedian than I never thought I would ever laugh at this topic, but then you made me. And if it can happen with suicide, obviously it's going to be able to happen with, we can't say that it can't happen with any other topic.
It's about execution.
It's about execution. It's about, just your skill set and just because somebody suffered a tragedy, it doesn't make it a foregone conclusion that they won't ever laugh again.
That's exactly right.
You want to surprise people. So that's the other thing that I think gets left out a lot of these controversial topics is a lot of the critics pretend like, nope, this is the way it is. People suffered, so you can't talk about it. And you go, well, you're not giving me the opportunity to help them heal either.
Yes.
So you can't talk about accountability. I'm only accountable for their pain, but you won't let me be accountable for helping them?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So if I could do a quick sort of primer on comedy and coping. So there's a bunch of theoretical and empirical work on this idea, right? So the first one is that laughter has some therapeutic benefits.
Yeah.
They're actually pretty mild. So you're better off exercising than laughing, for example.
The joke is penicillin. Penicillin works better, actually. Yeah.
Yes. But there are these emotional benefits. So that construction worker who goes to the club on a Friday night and laughs for a couple hours, there's a lot of positive emotions that are accompanying that.
Yeah.
Those positive emotions are really good. They're really good for us. They're good for us, for our well-being generally. And so the people who laugh a lot now have more positive emotion in their life. They're better off than the person who experiences less comedy.
Right.
There's actually a relational benefit to comedy, especially if you can create it well. And so funny people have more support. It's easy to like a funny person. It's hard to like a morose person, an angry person. It's easy to like a happy-go-lucky, funny person. what's fascinating about that is when the shit goes down, when things are bad, a funny person is able to maintain more levity.
Mm.
And what happens is you lose your job, okay? And now, you're depressed and you're complaining about it and everything. Your friends want to support you. Your family wants to support you, and they start supporting you. But you're always down about it. It's hard to spend time with someone who's always down.
Mm-hmm.
These are not professional therapists. They're not being paid to be there. And what they'll do is, for their own well-being, they'll start to pull back.
Yeah.
But a person who loses their job and they can make jokes about it, that person's kind of still fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
They're actually easier to support.
Mm-hmm.
And so comedy can be this glue that actually keeps the social support network around you
Together. Right.
And then the last one, and I think this is most related to what you're talking about, which is the act of making a joke about something. So Hannah Gatsby talks indirectly about this in her special Nanette, right? She doesn't use my vernacular of benign violations. She takes these violations in her life. She finds a way to make them benign, and the audience laughs about it.
Mm-hmm.
The act of taking something that's a tragedy and being able to joke about it, or you be able to hear a joke that you find funny about it, can rob that thing of its scariness, of its teeth, of its terror. And so, again, it's about execution because it has to be done well, but being able to joke about a tragedy, to be able to joke about terror, to be joke about cancer, robs that thing of the thing that makes it scary. And to be honest, many of the things that we suffer in our lives is actually not the pain of chemo.
Right.
It's the fear of cancer.
Yeah.
And so the problem with comedy is it's sloppy, it's arbitrary, it's not everybody's good at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
even the jokes that you told that moved that woman, they weren't always that good.
Right.
And
right.
so on.
And they weren't in that order. And
Yeah.
I wasn't confident about them. And by the way, if people are interested, because I always hate when a comedian's like, oh, I had these magical jokes. And you go, great, can I hear them?
I'll put them in the exhibit.
So somebody can just go on YouTube, and the name of the clip is Entertain the Thought.
Okay.
And it's about 30 minutes long, and it's almost all suicide jokes.
Okay.
And it's Ryan Stout, Entertain the Thought. And it was... that was just one recording that I did of them, but it was one of those situations where, people always say too that the audience is going to laugh because they're being polite, and I go, no, you've never seen a comedy audience if you think that's true. Well, they're only laughing because they're uncomfortable, and you go, no, audiences don't laugh in unison every 12 seconds because they're uncomfortable.
Yes, no.
You have to craft it. So when I had this successful evening, and it was a tiny little room, and everybody got on board and everybody stayed on board, I was like, all right, let's just put that on YouTube. Why not? We'll just throw it out there.
What's been the reaction to it?
Insanely positive, except from a few people who were like, no, because I believe you can never joke about suicide.
Yeah,
and you go, oh, but you haven't defended that topic other than saying it. And by the way, I've been approached by people after I was doing those jokes. I really don't do them anymore. I've moved past them, but tons of people who were like, there was a woman in the Bay Area. She said, we came to the show tonight because my fiance, the love of my life, killed himself 5 years ago today. And we wanted to get away from that bad thought. And when you were up there talking about suicide, I thought I was going to lose it. But it was actually really funny.
Okay.
But then there's a guy in Tempe, Arizona who's screaming at me. How dare, I hope nobody in your life ever commits suicide because you would know better. And he's being like dragged out the club.
I see.
And you go, sir, you didn't let me finish the jokes.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So you're interrupting something that was incomplete.
It's an interesting thing. So we were talking earlier about smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the ideal smartphone is before it gets mailed to you, you have a checklist and you're like, I would like this app. I would like this app. I would like that. I don't want that app. I don't want that app. I don't want that app. Like you decide, like you basically are Ulysses deciding, like what you can tolerate, so to speak. Like the ideal scenario is the person who's like, I would be open to hearing about this. I'd be open to hearing. Nope. I wouldn't want to.
Can't. And I think a lot of people now more than ever have that option with stand-up comedy. You can look up the performers before you go.
Yeah, you can get a feel for
in a lot of situations.
That's true.
Especially if you're in the middle of the country and there's one headliner at your local club for 6 shows. You can actually...
Yeah, you can curate your experience much better.
And I think that's important, too, because I would hate for somebody to come to my show and be upset when I could say, yeah, but you could have looked up that joke online before you got here.
Yeah, or get a feel for what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the thing is I don't go just see random bands. I only go see bands that I like the music.
Right. Yeah, and if somebody's playing reggae, you don't go, no, come on, play country.
Yeah, that's fine.
This sucks.
So we got to wrap. I want to ask my final question. I'm sure you're prepared.
I have a 45-minute answer. Let's go.
Do you want to just answer it without me asking the question? What are you reading, watching, or listening to that stands out? Not it's run-of-the-mill good, but is just really
sure.
Good.
So
one or two things.
Malcolm Gladwell has a book right now called Talking to Strangers.
I've heard it. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he just talks about how throughout our lives we meet people and you have to engage with them.
Oh, I see.
And he talks about what was her name? Anna Munoz. She was a Pentagon official who was actually a Cuban spy, and she was up at the top of the ranks and nobody suspected her for years and years and years. And even when they would bring her in to investigate her, to be like, we feel like you've done some things that are a little shady, she'd always be able to convince them that no, you know me. It's totally fine. People who actually had conversations with Adolf Hitler, and he would convince them, yeah, no, I'm not interested in invading Poland. And then sure enough, he does it. And why do we believe them? And also, like judges, they have to sit there on the bench and say, should I give this person, bail, or should I lock them up? And especially if it's in a situation like that person's mother is in the room and that mother's crying, like...
That matters.
Like, how do I work my way through this? And yet you don't know anything about this person other than what's on the docket in front of you. How do we make decisions about how we treat strangers?
I see.
And it's kind of a fascinating book because, as you know, my job is standing on stage talking to strangers.
Yes. So you're doing... I like that the book is... You're...
It's almost always that for me. I'm always looking for a way to be like, how does this relate to what I'm doing? And strangely enough, like when I go through my Audible queue, there's so many books that I would never guess where stand-up comedy would come up. And sure enough, there it is.
Yeah,
there was a book called Deep Work. I'm sure you've heard of it.
It influenced the thinking about work hard and hardly work.
Yeah.
The Cal Newport book.
Yeah. So I was listening to Cal Newport, and sure enough, he's talking about Seinfeld making a calendar.
I talk about then stick to business. Yeah, the don't break a chain.
Yeah, but I end up downloading all of these different books, not expecting stand-up to be mentioned at all. And it comes up so frequently because it is such a strange job for people. You're standing on stage in front of strangers and everybody expects this magical thing to happen. Mm-hmm. I don't know why anybody would ever own a comedy club. That seems like this weirdest business to go into.
It's
Yeah. I'm going to put these funny people on stage and people will just show up and listen and laugh. It'll be great. We'll give them drinks. No, you're out of your mind.
Ryan, thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I hope this met your level of professionalism.
It absolutely did. There was water. The mics worked. Did you hit record? Oh, no.
No, we are recording.
We lost all of it.
Yes, I really appreciate the time.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr. Peter McGraw next week for another fun, fascinating conversation on I'm Not Joking.